All right, welcome back. Today's show, I've got a friend from college that I haven't talked to in actually 2 decades. We probably have a lot more in common than what we realize, but I'm glad he's coming on the show. Bobby Petras, the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah.
I've been following him on Facebook for a while, and he's doing some interesting stuff. And actually, just thinking about, we did a show about senior living a few shows ago. And I know he's in that space and want to get him on. But Bobby, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. And yeah, too bad. I feel like maybe we ran into each other at a Tiffin thing less than 20 years ago. But yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think we're at a golf outing. So obviously we went to college together. You played college football.
Yep.
You're a great college football player. And after that, what did you? Well, first of all, give us your intro. Your bio? What are you doing right now?
So what I'm doing right now is, since roughly 2008, my sister and I, along with my mom and my wife, started a company, what is now called Priority Life Care. So we manage and own some assisted living, memory care, independent living units. And that's really what my main job is. My sister and I own, I believe, 13 other businesses together, ranging from a pharmacy to a lab, a wellness company, a hospice company, a development company, a maintenance company, a lot of stuff, most of which kind of all kind of revolve around senior housing. And then my wife and I have some really interesting investments where we're partnered with Tim Tebow, the football player. We own part of Dude Perfect. If you've heard of Dude Perfect, the trick shot guys. We own part of Tesla that does the internet, Starlink, and a couple other really cool investments that center around ending human trafficking. But we've been part of the Tebow Foundation for probably the last year and a half, kind of doing some of that cool stuff. And then on top of it, I have 4 kids. I've been married to my wife for almost 19 years. Now we have 4 kids that are in every single sport you can imagine. And I've made the decision to play college basketball this season at the University of St. Francis. So been juggling a lot here lately. And as we were talking before we started recording, I get up extremely early every morning so I can try to squeeze that in. So.
Yeah. And I want to dive into all that. And you brought up Tim Tebow Foundation. Just from some of your posts, kind of keeping up with you, it looks like you give back a lot, which is awesome. And we want to get into that. So after college, what did you do? I know a little bit, but this is where the story gets interesting.
Yeah. So I played football, ran track at Tiffin. And I had a pretty good senior football season and was getting looked at by some NFL teams. Couple of those teams came to Tiffin to, when I had a pro day or whatever. And I posted some pretty good times. I ran a sub 4 540. I think I had a 38-inch vertical. And then my best thing was changing direction. So I could laterally move really fast. So I tested kind of off the charts on that stuff. And through that, I then went and signed and played a little bit for this team called the Cincinnati Swarm. They're an arena team in Cincinnati. But then I still had to finish school. So I was trying to do that and do school and I just couldn't do it. And so I came back to Tiffin and this agent had got a hold of me named Tom Tefelsky. And he's like, hey, the Lions really like you. They recommend that, you meet with me. And so I met with him and signed a deal with him. And then we met with the Lions. They're like, hey, we want more tape on you. There's this team in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You should go check them out. All right. So I drive to Fort Wayne, Indiana, show up. This is no lie, man. I show up to practice on a Tuesday or something like that. I practice. They cut the starting free safety right after practice, right in front of me. This guy loses his, throwing everything. And they're like, yeah, you're starting in the game on Saturday. All right. So it happened to be really close to my hometown. We played the Wheeling, called the Ohio Valley Greyhounds, but it was in Wheeling, West Virginia, really close to where I grew up. It's all my family got to come, had a great game, had an interception, all stuff. So midway through the season, the Lions invite me up to Detroit for a tryout. It's just me and Herman Moore, if you remember him, like
Mhm.
he was the guy that like showed me around that day. And Mariucci was the coach and Matt Millen. So like we sat down with these guys and I had to run and like do all that stuff. And I had developed a skill long snapping. When I was at Tiffin, I was a holder because I was a quarterback, but I would always mess around and I learned how to long snap. We had this coach named Dick Pierce who was like a really good special teams guy, and he taught me how to long snap. So anyway, I'm up there long snapping. I've never long snapped in a game before, but I was fast, and the Lions loved that. And they're like, want to bring me in. It's like between me and another guy about getting invited to this like rookie camp. So anyway, I tested out really well. Come back to Fort Wayne, finishing out the season. I get a call from my agent. Hey, they're probably going to bring you into this camp. Quit playing, don't get hurt, kind of thing, you know. I'm like, all right, that's smart. So like not official yet, but like, hey, you're probably gonna get invited. So I call my coach. I'm like, hey, I can't play. It's the last game of the year. We're not gonna make the playoffs. He's like, that's fine. My dad comes up, we pack up my apartment, and my phone rings. It's the coach. He's like, hey, such and such got hurt. Another guy quit. I really need you to play. I'll pay you double, whatever. You know, I'm like, he's like, we got to play both ways. You got to play receiver and free safety. I'm like, okay. So I'm having the game of my life. I've got 2 interceptions on defense. I forced a fumble, recovered an onside kick, caught like 3 passes, caught a touchdown pass, and we're killing this team. And the coach takes me out with like maybe 2 minutes to play. Guy that goes in for me gets hurt. I go back in the very next play. We're just running the ball, like run the clock out. Quarterback cuts off of my block. The guy that tried to tackle him missing rolls into my leg and breaks my leg.
Oh man.
So like I thought it was my knee at first. Go back to locker. I'm kind of moving around, but I'm in pain. So I go, it's my fibula. And then like, you know, the fibula is supposed to be the best bone to break. It's non-weight bearing and it only takes 6 to 8 weeks to heal. So I'm like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to get healthy. And like, you know, so Lions invite me to camp. I can't go. Then I'm like, my agent had the like number 3, like free agents in all Arena 1 attached me to all their contracts. I couldn't pass physical. So like my bone was hypertrophic, which meant it wouldn't heal. So mine took 8 months to heal instead of 8 weeks.
Man.
So I kind of like, you know, got healthy enough to come back and play for Fort Wayne again. Wasn't the same player. Like I got a little slower, but we had a really good season. And then like, you know, I'm still chasing that NFL dream, but like, then the next year I had surgery. And so I played 3 years and like really kind of maximized. Like I got traded in my last year and I really kind of went out the way I wanted to go out. Like I had a good game. The last game we played against this guy named Fred Jackson, who ended up playing like 10 years in the NFL for like the Bills. And I kind of went out and I was good. Like I was like, all right, I got all the football out of me. Like let's go. And at the time, like in my last season, I started working in sales, which is kind of like what sprung us to where we're at now. I kind of, that was outside of sports. It was the one thing I was like, man, I'm good at this. And like, I want to do it. And, you know, you're a former athlete, right? It's like when you lose your identity as an athlete, like, you know, when you'd go home from college and, you know, what are you doing I play football and track. Like, I didn't say I was studying business. I mean, that wasn't, you know, so I was really tough for me. Like I remember very specifically the first time I went back home to see my parents and I ran into somebody who's like, oh, who are you playing for now? And I was like, I'm not playing anymore. I have a job. So, you know, I've really never stopped being an athlete. I went from playing, you know, when I finished playing football, I fell into jiu-jitsu. And I got really competitive in jiu-jitsu. And I did that at a really high level for about 4 years, maybe even 5 years. And one of the guys that I trained with all the time was fighting in the UFC, a guy named Anthony Lapsley. And I don't want to say I was like beating him, but I was really improving. And sometimes I was beating him in our training sessions. And he's like, you need to fight. I was like, I don't want to fight. He's like, no. You're going to fight. He's like, my whatever's got to fight in Indianapolis. He's like, we're going to put you on the card. All right. Well, so I go in. Now, listen, I've been at fights before, but like when you like sign up to be in a cage fight, it's like completely different. In jiu-jitsu, you can't get hit. But I would, you know, fight in training and stuff. So we go down to this the Indianapolis Armory, and and we get in, and this guy's got tattoos. I mean, like everywhere, and I would fight at 185 pounds, but I really weighed like 200 pounds. So I was like a lot bigger than this guy, but he was, anyway. So they like lock the cage door, and I'm like, oh man, I'm doing this. And when you first start training, you have a tendency to put your chin back up and kind of go like this. It's just like a natural reaction. We call it throwing purses. Okay. So, I've been training for a long time. So this guy comes at me, and immediately I start throwing purses, and I can't believe it. So I like panic, and I double leg and take him down, but he lands on top of me in full mount. He's kind of hitting me, and I'm thinking, man, I really hope the ref doesn't stop the fight. I shrimp out. I put him in an arm bar. He doesn't even defend it, and I pull as hard as I can, and I break his elbow. Like his elbow shot through his arm, and they have to stop the fight. They have to clear out the whole arena. They bring in an ambulance. They have to cast this guy up in the thing, and I'm like, I'm back in the locker room. I'm dead tired. I can't even like lift my arms up. And I turn to my buddy and I go, did that fight like almost go the whole first round? He's like, Petras, the fight was 38 seconds. I'm like, what? He's like, you have adrenaline dump. So then from fighting, I found CrossFit. I've been doing CrossFit pretty competitively for the last decade. And that's kind of why my body's in like good enough shape. When I tell people I'm, 43 and a half, and I'm going to play college basketball, they're like, I don't understand how you can do it. Well, I've stayed in really good shape the last 10 years doing CrossFit. And now my body it's good, but like my hamstrings and my Achilles are hanging on by a thread, I think, every day.
I get that. So I want to dive into identity. And we've talked about that quite a bit on the show. We've had former college athletes on here. And I know I obviously didn't have the success that you had in sports, but it was still a part of me, right? Like basketball that's what I thought I was. I thought I was a basketball player. Even though I didn't play that much, I thought I was a basketball player, right? Yeah. And I remember the switch for me. I went from after college, I worked a little bit, and then like a year or two out, I started coaching, and that kind of propelled me a little bit, right? And then I felt a switch. Literally, it was my last season. It was right before, I think it was a month before our daughter was born, first kid, and it was like a light switch, just shut off. And I'm like, I don't need basketball anymore. Like, I'm good. It sounded like you had that with football after your last arena game. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what's crazy is, so that was probably like in 2004 or 5 or something like that. In 2009, when my wife was pregnant with our first, a guy that I was friends with, he had bought the team I played for, and he called me and was like, hey, are you in shape? I'm like, I'm always in shape. What's up? He's like, I need you to play. I'm like, play what? He's like, football. I'm like, dude, I haven't played in years. He's like, it's the end of the year, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, everybody's got one more game, right? So like I suit up, and I remember, again, I used to be one of the fastest guys on the team. It's the first kickoff, and like the kicker beat me down because I'm like, I don't want to get hit. And I go to the silent coach like, Petras, what are you doing? I was like, I'll be all right. So we play the game, we win. Now this league that they're in now is like kind of falling apart, and like we win. A couple of other teams like just fold, and we somehow make the playoffs. So now I've got like 2 or 3 weeks to get ready. I played another game, and I was kind of ready to play. We ended up making it to the freaking championship. And this is a year where arena football took a pause. Like they lost their main sponsor was the U.S. Army, and they lost it. So like we had this like kind of like mega league, and we ended up losing to the Chicago team, the championship. But like I was done for sure. And like I like was not the same player, that I was. But like, again, I have always still kept, I'm 43 years old, and I'm still consider myself an athlete. And I don't know that I can shake that. Like like your coaching experience, when I broke my leg, I got offered a graduate assistant job at Robert Morris. And I remember I was super excited. Like these guys were ex-NFL coaches. But I left that, and I told my now wife, I was like, I'm still a player. Like I can't coach.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I think I like coaching now. Like I coach softball, I coach soccer, I coach football, like all those sports that like I'd never want to play. Like I like to coach that. I don't think I could coach basketball right now because I want to play basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. That's cool. So you got into sales. What was your first sales gig?
So my very first job is I sold insurance for State Farm Insurance. And of all the jobs I've had, probably the one that I've got the most life lessons from, like literally just learning the insurance game.
Well, I'm sure they have a good sales training program too, right?
It was pretty good. Yeah. I mean, but just like learning like how important life insurance is, when you're younger and you think you're invincible, that doesn't matter. But like, when you have family or you're like my parents are, getting older, like that stuff's important. And then we had this sponsor called Centennial Wireless. And I took that job literally because they're like, you get a base salary of $24,000 and you get commission. And I'm thinking, oh, whatever. I don't care if I even sell anything. And they were pretty flexible with my football schedule. Mm-hmm. But that company had the best training. Like they were, head and shoulders past everybody at the time for training. It was that job for $24,000. You went through training on the job, and then you went through like a whole week of training at their corporate office, and you had to take a test. And if you failed the test, you got fired. Mm. And so like I have taken so many training principles and other things from Centennial Wireless, which doesn't exist anymore. They sold to AT&T a few years back, into the company that we run now. And a lot of the people that I work with at Centennial have gone on to have a lot of success. And I think it's a huge part because of the training. Yeah.
Well, I think it was the last episode. It happens a lot. It seems like a lot of entrepreneurs have a sales background. I do. And I think it's very important. Last guy I talked to or interviewed, he talked about how just being able to relate to people is what helped him through sales. So what do you think sales has done for you?
I never really thought of myself as like a sales person. Like I did really well. So they had President's Club, which was like for the top 10 and top 10% of the company in sales. And I made that every year that I was in sales. I'm a relationship guy. I'm still like that now. All of the stuff that I do is relationship based. So I never felt like I was hard selling somebody. When someone came in to buy something, it was just more natural, like getting to know them. Yep. And I would say the same thing now. Like my wife and I, we have a nonprofit called the Bobby and Brandy Sports Foundation, where we just help underprivileged youth in sports. And all of the stuff that we've done has come out of relationships that we've made here in Fort Wayne, and we do a lot of stuff in Toronto, Ohio, where I'm from, with my high school and the middle school, all relationship based, nothing that I ever set out to do.
Yep. No, you're dead on. I always hated the title of salesman or whatever. To me, it's just, you're just making friends.
Yeah.
And friends buy from friends, right? That's about as simple as it is.
People that you can trust. It's funny in my business now, we buy a lot of stuff, right? Like, so food would be like our number one thing. We have 72 communities right now. If you add all that up, it's millions of dollars in food every month. And then there's other like little things like, we have an IT provider, we have this, and like almost all of those people are like my good friends. Like the guy that we use this product called Viking Pure. It's electrolyzed water, right? So it's stronger than bleach, but you can drink it. So it's like very like safe. And this guy named Dan Lawson, he's coming to Fort Wayne today just to hang out. Like we have no other agenda other than we've become friends and we're going to hang out and play golf later. And that's the kind of people that I want to continue to do business with, people that you can be friends with.
Absolutely. All right. So a couple sales jobs. What happened from there?
So I'm in this sales job and I had been promoted now. And my wife and I go back to my hometown, Toronto, Ohio, for Thanksgiving. My sister, who was a banker and she lived in Chicago, she did lending in the senior housing space. So like nursing homes, assisted livings. And so she brought home a case of wine. We're drinking wine before this is a day before Thanksgiving. And she has an easel and it has like a business plan on it. And it's got an organizational chart. And she's like, we're all going to quit our jobs and we're going to start this assisted living management company. I mean, I didn't even know anything about assisted living. My mother was an administrator at a community, and she had only been an administrator for maybe like 6 months. My mom had always worked in the medical field. She worked for Aetna Insurance. She worked in a doctor's office and so forth. My dad worked in a mill my whole life. And so my sister's pitching this idea. She's like, I already have the perfect team. My wife was a social worker. So she's like, Brandy's going to do that piece. Like, I think she had me labeled as like the HR guy at first or whatever. And, my mom's going to be operations. My sister had a banking background, so she'd be the CFO. And we're all kind of cheers. I'm like, this is a great idea. When we were driving back to Fort Wayne a couple of days later, my wife's like, you're not going to quit your job, are you? I was like, no, but my sister's probably onto something. So one by one, we either quit or got fired. I got fired. My wife got fired. My mom got fired. And my sister, the 2008 banking crisis hit, and my sister's bank got bought out. She worked for Merrill Lynch, and then like GE bought them out or whatever. So she got a severance, and she moved back in with my mom and dad because she was training for an Ironman. And so here I am, I'm working still, eventually get fired. My wife, I get fired in February, like right before my birthday. We find out we're pregnant with our first in like March or April. And I have no job. My wife's a social worker. She makes like $30,000 a year. And we think we want to start this company, right? So like I am trying to like figure out ways that we can find our first property. And we're looking in Ohio because they had the Medicaid program that we really liked. And I'm kind of like driving back and forth and all this stuff. And also, the day I got fired, I had a lease. We had leased this Mercedes, and the lease was up. So I turned in the car. We hadn't picked out a new car yet. A guy that I work with, drove me to work, and then I got fired. So the guy that fired me had to drive me home. So I have no car. My mom ends up giving me her like purple Honda Civic, which had like 200 and some thousand miles on it. And the ceiling, I had to put like tacks to hold it up. So I'm like driving all over Ohio trying to find a property. We have literally no money at this point. We both cash in our 401ks just to kind of keep going. And fast forward to, we find this property in Maple Heights, Ohio. My sister had been talking to a guy that she had lent to, and he had probably like 7 or 8 nursing homes and stuff. And so we kind of pitched him our idea, and he's like, I'll tell you what, I already have a back office in place and I can help get the financing. You guys do all the operations and we'll partner. He's like, I think he gave my sister like 18% ownership. And we were like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we'll do it. So my daughter was born December 3rd, 2009. We opened our first building January 1st, 2010. So we took that one property, and over the course of the next like 3 or 4 years, we grew to about 5 or 6. And it just kind of got crazy. So from 2010 to 2015, we grew to maybe 7 or 8 with this guy. In 2015, he comes to us and says, hey, I'm selling everything. I'm getting out of this business. I'm focusing on another business. And basically, you guys have to figure it out. Now, we had some great successes. Like we had bought a building for, like $5 million and sold it for like $15 million. But he took all the money. And he'd be like, hey, we're going to roll that in. You'll get it on the next deal. Well, we never got it. Like we just kept rolling. So 2015 hits, and we're kind of like, all right, we're probably all going to go our own separate ways. We've got some contacts now in the industry. We'll just kind of go get jobs. And about 2 weeks later, like my sister and I got together and we're like, we got to figure this out. Let's just figure something out. And so we have no money really because like we had been paid, but not really. Right. And so here we go again, my wife and I. So we were able to buy 3 buildings through like a sale leaseback. All right. In order to get the equity, I got to cash in all my savings again. So my wife and I, 401k, and we go at it. And my sister does the same thing. So we get these 3 buildings and they're doing pretty well. And we take on, in our business, you can do like third-party management contracts. So somebody like you may go buy a building, you have no idea how to run it, but you're buying it for the real estate and some of the operational income. And you'll hire my company to do basically the rest. And so we took a couple of those contracts just to make ends meet so we could start building a back office because we didn't have one. We started the office out of the CrossFit gym that I own. And that's just kind of like, where we're at. So we're probably like 6 or 7 months into it. It's doing well, except we have this one building that's just killing us. So my wife and I took out a second mortgage on our house so we'd have enough money to get a line of credit just to kind of like keep things going. And so that's working for us so 2016, we survive. I mean, we literally just survived. 2017, we started doing better. 2018, we're doing a little better. And then 2019, we have more third-party contracts than we own. And we sit down, my sister and I sit down and say, hey, like, let's go all in on the third-party stuff and let's figure out a way to get out of the own stuff. Because we didn't own the real estate, we were leasing it. Mm-hmm. So we spent all of 2019 trying to get out of our leases, which at that point we had 7 of them. So like November 1st, 2019, we exited our leases. All right. What happens like less than 6 months later? COVID. So COVID absolutely crushes our industry. But because we didn't own anything, we went from like 10 properties to 30. So like 2020 for us was like incredible. We had managed our stuff the right way. We had got rid of all of our liabilities. And so, we have 72 properties now and we're actively bringing on 45. If we didn't exit the ones, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I can tell you that.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I want to dive into all that. First of all, why the leap of faith? I know you said a lot of you guys, you're either fired or you quit your job, whatever reason, but why not find another job? Why the leap of faith to go outside of your comfort zone and say, let's do something on our own here?
Well, I did skip around a little bit. So I will tell you, so I did take another job. So I was bartending, but just for cash, right? So trying to do this. And then it was really dragging out. And so my wife is pregnant. I took a job just back in what I knew is this. I took a job for Sprint. And I remember I was there for like a week or something. And my sister called me and she was like, look, you're either in or you're out. Like that's it. Like she's like, I'm going to do this anyway. And you're either in or you're out. And I went home and I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, I think this is it. And so my wife is like, been like behind us the whole time. Like, I think it's a good idea. And we really didn't know how to do it. But like before we had our first, right, it was like, we felt like we could take a little bit more risk. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed like looking back, it was a big risk, but it seemed like, well, you know what, whatever, if it doesn't work, I'll get a job. Yep. The bigger risk that I felt is when we had to figure out how to buy our partner out and we really didn't have any money. It was like, we have to do it. Like now I have 2 kids. Now there was a point in between there. So my sister had done really well, but she spent all of the money she got in her severance and like paying us a little bit and like some of the other startup costs. So I'll never forget this. My sister had a condo in Chicago. Now this is after 2008. So like the mortgage crisis and all this stuff. And so she had been renting this condo out and the guy that was renting it wanted to buy it. Well, the problem is my sister had to come out of pocket to sell it. She calls me. She's like, I need $15,000 to sell the condo. And she's like, can I borrow the money from you? And I'm like, let me talk to Brandy. We have $15,500 in our bank account. That's all I have. That's the only money I have. And we have a kid. And I said to my wife, she goes, 100%, it's your sister. We have to. So I wrote a check to my sister for $15,000. We have $500 left. and then it obviously it worked out. But like, I do remember that thinking like, oh crap, like I got $500 left and I have a kid. But there's been multiple things kind of throughout our journey where it's like, it seems like, we're just pushing all our chips in and we're continuously betting on ourselves. And I feel like I'm not a betting person. Like I don't like to bet on events, but I'll bet, like if you challenge me, I'll bet on myself every time because I can control the outcome of that.
Yep.
So,
yep, 100%. What it sounds like your sister's more the visionary. Is that 100%. Right? Are you kind of the integrator?
I'm the guy that gets it done. So like my sister will come up with some crazy ideas. And then now, I mean, we have a huge team now. I mean, we've got on my corporate team, I think we have like 80 or 90 people, but my right hand, I would say my left hand is my wife. My right hand is a guy named Ryan Person. He's our chief strategy officer. So he and I do a ton of whiteboarding. And we've come up with a lot of the stuff, like the newer stuff that we've done. But yeah, my sister, man, she's got big, huge ideas. And then we're the ones that kind of have to like implement it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's awesome. What's so the my buddy that I had on doing senior living, he does more like, I forget the size of houses. We'll call them like 5,000-6,000 square feet houses where it's like 4, 5, 6 bedrooms. They make those in the senior living. What are your buildings look like?
Yeah, I would say like a normal building for us is going to be between 60 to 100 units. I mean, we have some that are 250 units, but much bigger. So we've got a mix. So we've got one of our products is called a low income housing tax credit product. Those are paid for by Medicaid traditionally, but they're brand new ground up construction, like $15-20 million properties. Our bread and butter is what we call middle market. So middle market would be, depending on what state it's in, more on the affordable side, but paid for privately. So, I like to say like our average resident in a middle market product might be somebody that worked at, the Chevy plant, and had a pension and saved it. And now they're, in their, 83 to 95 and, can pay for it privately. And then there's, strictly independent living. So we've got 8 of those in Florida that are like, people drive, live in an apartment. It's, communal living. So, if you have food available, if you want it, or if you don't. And so, but most of what we get are middle market products that at one time might've been on the higher end, but now the buildings are 20 or 30 years old. And there's just almost nobody in the space that does it like we do it. And so our biggest client is a REIT called Ventas REIT. They're like a $25 billion REIT. And then our second biggest is a REIT called American Healthcare REIT. So they'll take their asset and we'll help like reposition it. And it's worked really well for us.
Gotcha. When you were looking for properties initially, what properties, I'm just imagining trying to find like 60, 80 unit senior living properties. What properties are you looking for?
At first we were looking at hotels. We wanted to convert a hotel. And a lot of them were vacant because again, this is after 2008 where like everything kind of hit the fan. So the first property we got it used to be a hotel, then it was converted to independent living, and then we converted it to assisted living. But after, like in 2010, man, it was easy to find a property. You had all these properties that struggled because of the financial crisis. And so we had a good partner that had capital. And so we were able to buy this stuff for like really cheap. And once we did it 2 or 3 times, it was super easy to go back to the same bank. There's a lot of banks that just work in senior housing. And so like they get the ebbs and flows of it. But like it was, now it's very different. We're in a similar cycle right now. Cause we kind of had a recent financial crisis. But because of the COVID dollars and some of the other government assistance, like it's pushed out. So like we're starting to see a lot more stuff come back online this year. I think this year and next year, it'll be similar to like 2010 when we first got into it. But there's no shortage of opportunities for us. That's for sure.
That's awesome. And that's kind of, I would say that's somewhat not opposite, but different from the rest of real estate asset classes. Like storage, who really knows where we're at? Multifamily is still hot. There will be opportunities just because people will default on loans, but they're going to be probably bigger assets.
Yeah.
But let's get into, I know you're doing other stuff. Sounds like you're pretty well vertically integrated as far as businesses that you own. What business do you own outside of the healthcare?
So
I know
I've
you said
owned
you got a CrossFit gym.
Yeah, I've owned a CrossFit gym for 11 years, Matt Apple CrossFit. And really it's Matt Apple Fitness brand. We also have Matt Apple Sports Performance. And then we own Matt Apple Softball, which is a travel softball organization. And I have 2 locations here in Fort Wayne. One is a 15,000 square foot, mostly CrossFit, but we have a 1,500 square foot turf area where we do a lot of the sports performance. And then on the north side of town, I own a baseball softball academy. That's another, 12,000 square feet where we've got 7 batting tunnels, 4 pitching tunnels, a full infield. So it's really cool. The one thing that I've noticed in specifically softball is that these organizations will like build up and then fall apart, build up, fall apart, build up, fall apart. And normally it's because like a dad exits or like the mom or whatever. And so they're just constantly up and down. So I wanted to bring stability, at least to softball in Fort Wayne. My oldest plays softball. My 12-year-old doesn't even play softball, which I think is hilarious. But my wife and I want to bring stability to that, make it a real business. We have someone that runs it. We're actually hiring a new director right now. And we're able to provide, financial stability, where most of these clubs are like, if they don't collect every dollar, they're not going to make it through the season. And, we want to change that. And then I'd mentioned some of the other investments we have, like, I think we technically own like 3.5% of Dude Perfect, Starlink. And this is all through, like our connections with Tim Tebow and the Tim Tebow Foundation. There's a really cool product called Deja Vu, that we own a small percentage of, and it's a pattern recognition software, but its main purpose is to locate people that have been kidnapped. And it's really, really cool stuff. And I know we've got working with some of the government agencies here in the States, have been able to make some pretty cool saves. But my connection with the Tebow Foundation has opened up some really cool investment stuff. And the coolest story that I have is that my neighbor is the CEO of Tim's Foundation. And he comes to me one day at church and was like, hey, we're putting together this minority group to buy part of the Washington Commanders. I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. And, he's like telling me all about it. Well, like a week later, he calls me and he's like, hey, one of the investors backed out. Do you want in? What's the deal? And he's like, oh, you get tickets and, you can go on the field and blah, blah, blah. And if they ever win a Super Bowl, you get a Super Bowl ring. I'm like, sign me up. Yeah. So we put this group together, and it's like, I get the documents for the group, and one of the partners is Bryson DeChambeau. Another one of the partners, Luke Bryant. Another guy's Jason Baker. He was like a punter for the Chiefs for years, and like my wife and a couple other people. So we're like all excited. We get initial approval by NFL Finance Committee. And of course, Tim Tebow is one of the partners. And then like the day before, Jim Irsay kicks out our group and 2 other groups. She said we were made up to like too much private equity or something. And so we kept the group together. And then so we've been investing in some of this other stuff. So I got invited down to Tim's office to meet some of the people. Like Colt McCoy is actually one of the people too. So I got to sit next to Colt McCoy and his wife. And there's a couple like people from Pete Hegseth, I think he's from Fox, and this other guy that's like a billionaire. And I mean, we're just kind of in this room, just like, throwing out ideas, which was really cool. And only because of what we talked about earlier, relationships, right? I have a relationship with my neighbor. We've become friends. He invited me into this. Otherwise, if I'd never met Tommy Martin, I wouldn't have got to do some of that cool stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so funny how, man, at least 90% of the shows that I have, everyone talks about their success comes from relationships. Like it's really that simple. It's relationships. And I mean, you got to put in the work, but it starts with relationships. So your roles in these different companies, obviously you're not managing everything. What's your roles in all these companies?
So my job's really shifted. Because our executive vice president of operations, Dave Closer, runs Priority Life Care, which is like our main business. Like he runs the day-to-day ops there. My My job now is I run all the verticals. So like Dave reports to me, but all of our other supportive companies, so, the pharmacy, the wellness company, the hospice company, like all of that stuff has really become our main focus. And then creating workflow efficiencies for everything, right? And we're constantly looking at, like, we own part of a GPO, group purchasing organization. So like that relationship. And then like my biggest thing is we have all these owners. I mean, we probably have 13 or 14 different ownership groups. So like I am still the main contact for all those groups. Like this morning, I've got 2 separate calls with 2 different ownership groups that one we're a partner with because we've co-invested in some of the stuff, and other ones we're just hired help. So that takes up most of my day. And then we have new deals coming on. So I still do 90% of the new deal flow stuff. So when we set up, I organize our team to go through, and put the proposal and stuff together. And then my sister and I normally are involved heavily on the pitch to the, potential new prospect.
Yeah. So clearly you're busy, and we talked a little bit before we started about your routine, but what does your typical routine look like? Typical day?
Yeah. If I'm home, my typical routine is going to be up at 5, sauna for 20, 30 minutes. I have a really cool like outdoor sauna, and then I cold plunge outside too. Doesn't matter if it's the winter, summer, spring, fall. I don't care. That's what I do. 2-3 minutes. Then right now I'll shoot basketball for an hour. I've got, one of those machines, the Dr. Dish you can shoot into and it comes back. And so there's a couple of their kids I'm going to play basketball with, Isaiah and Damari. We meet at the gym at St. Francis, and we shoot for an hour. Normally go have breakfast, and then we go work out at Mad Apple or at my place. And then my day-to-day changes every day. So we have an office here in Fort Wayne, which we actually just bought. And so I'm in there most days. The summers, I'm a lot more flexible just because my kids always have something. Cool thing about, what I do is I can do it anywhere. And then in the evening, depending on what my kids have going on, I'm either coaching or at a sport, but I am always now actively recovering. So I've got every recovery device you can imagine. Sometimes I'm wearing multiple ones while I'm watching my kids play. And then I'll normally try to get something in at night, whether it's like an extra shooting session or like maybe like I'm working on, strengthening my hamstrings right now. So I may be doing some of that stuff, but I'm also always recovering because I'm old. Trying to play basketball
because I'm old. No, that's awesome, man. That's clearly you have full days and you got your routine down. I want to talk about a little bit about you giving back, because I've seen you dress up as Batman, drive around the city handing out gifts and stuff at Christmas. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So people talk about like your love language. Like my love language is giving. I'm really bad at receiving gifts, like horrible, like bad. But I love to give. And so I grew up low end to middle class. Like my dad worked in a mill. My mom always kind of had a job or two, but we really didn't have anything extra. Like I got my first brand new pair of shoes when I was 12. Right. And so I've always thought of like, the kid that was me or had less than me. Cause like I had my parents, I never missed a meal, but I didn't have anything extra, And so my first thing always is like a kid that's like me, especially if they're involved in sports. And so we have done things like we provide scholarships for multiple club teams around town here. Every year, my sister and I buy and my wife, we buy new shoes for every football player at our high school in a new book bag. And then it seems like every other year we buy them jerseys. This year they won the conference championship. So we bought them conference championship rings. But I love to do stuff for the high school. It's easy for me because that's, where I grew up. And then at Tiffin University, we've donated a lot of money and also, resources. Like we bought the softball team a new pitching machine. We bought jerseys for the football team. And then here in town, we do a couple of really cool things. So every year, a group of people from my gym we dress up as superheroes and we go to Parkview Hospital around Christmas time and give gifts to kids. And then I do a lot of stuff with Woodside Middle School, which is where my kids go to school. We bought new jerseys for the basketball teams, the soccer teams. We're buying new jerseys for the football team this year. Just stuff like that it's pretty easy. Now that I'm playing basketball for St. Francis, I'm donating a lot of time and money to the basketball program because, I want to bring it up and working with the softball program there. But, first and foremost, we'll always make our focus towards children. Our kids, I tell my kids, like, they have everything. If they're not good at something or they don't succeed at life, it's not my fault. I mean, I'm giving them every opportunity and every single thing. If they don't take advantage of it, that's on them. Yeah. But we're trying to provide that to other kids too, right? Because I have this theory that when you know somebody, firsthand know somebody that's become successful, it becomes much more achievable. Yeah. You can do it. My kids think they're better than me at everything. So I believe that they'll be more successful than me because they know that they can do it.
That's very well put. Do you also, and I 100% agree. I look back and think, I wish I would have probably made a bigger circle of people that, I don't want to say more successful, but my circle wasn't big enough. Right. And you're going to become the average of your circle anyways.
100%.
But do you think, because obviously you had a different childhood than your kids and probably drove you to where you are now, do you think they'll have that same drive?
I hope so. I mean, my kids, if we're just looking at sports, they work really hard. I mean, my 14-year-old plays travel softball and volleyball. And this year in middle school, she played basketball, volleyball, track, and soccer, and also played travel and maintained a 3.8, which is better than what I had. So she works really hard, and my 12-year-old does. My 7-year-old son works harder than any kid I've ever seen. 3 hours a day practicing basketball, just having fun. I don't know for sure that they will, but I think that one of my hopes and dreams is they see that how hard that me and their mom work and take that and the same thing with what I'm doing trying to play basketball. I had two regrets. I wanted to play basketball when I was at Tiffin. I really did, and I even talked to the coach a few times about it, but my priority was playing football, and I knew I would lose weight if I played basketball. I mean, you just can't keep it on. So I made the decision not to do it. My other was I started my MBA in 2007, and when we started the business, I quit. So it always bothered me that I started something, didn't finish it. So I went back and I finished my MBA at Tiffin this past year. And then I was like, I wonder if I could play basketball. So then I started working with St. Francis softball. We bought them new jerseys and new tarp and some other new bags and stuff. And a guy that I played arena football with is on the as a coach there. And I just kind of mentioned, I wish I played basketball. He's like, oh, well, we're NAIA. You probably still have some eligibility. And that's why, that kind of all happened. So I hope through this process where they see me, because I don't want to just be an active participant. I want to be meaningful. I'm not going to, I don't want to sit the bench. I'm going to do everything I can to get my butt on the court. And it may not be enough, but I will tell you, no one's going to outwork me. Even at 43, I'm putting in the work. And I will tell you the reason I've been successful, and I tell people this all the time, it's a very simple recipe. Outwork everybody. Yep. When I was at Tiffin, so I went to Findlay my freshman year, right? And I feel like I was a harsh working kid there. I was one of two freshmen to letter. Transferred to Tiffin, always worked hard. But I played mostly special teams my sophomore year, and I played receiver. Then my junior year, kind of the same thing. And towards the end of my junior year, we had lost a game, and I was in the weight room working out. And the head coach at the time, Cam Crookshank, came up to me and he was like, you really want to play, don't you? I said, well, I'm not just in here for my health coach. And he's like, hey, did you ever play defense? I'm like, I was all state in high school at free safety. He's like, go talk to Coach Eastman. Let's see about moving you to defense. So I moved to defense the end of my junior year, and I play every game and I play really well. And I went from not playing to then becoming not just a starter, but captain. I was defensive player of the year in the conference, and literally all because I worked hard. And I remember at one point in my junior year, I remember telling my dad, I was like, hey man, like, I think my like dream of playing professional football is done, man. Like I can't even get on the field. And my dad's like, no, like you can still do it. And like my dad's blind faith in me, honestly, like that is one of the big reasons, like I'm super driven to help kids, because there's so many kids that don't have like that, positive any figure, let alone their dad. Like my dad has, I can tell you one story that's probably driven me almost my whole life is I had gone to football weight training. Like I was going to be a freshman. So I was in 8th grade, and my dad had to pick me up because I couldn't drive. Right. And we're driving back, and my dad's like, you're going to be the starting quarterback on the varsity next year. I said, Dad, I was like, Mark Kelly, who was a quarterback the year before. I was like, I'm not anywhere close as good as him, blah, blah, blah. My dad like jerks the car on the side of the road. Like we're like on the side of the road. And he's like, F Mark Kelly. What? He's like, if all you ever want to be is as good as Mark Kelly, you'll never be nothing in this life. He's like, if you don't want to be the best, don't do it. And I was like, whoa, and I mean, it really like, I was like, wow, he's right. Why would I do this if I don't want to be better than everybody? And guess what? I was a starting quarterback my freshman year. So I say that kind of stuff to my kids too. It's like, you can be envious of somebody and you could look at their skill, but you need to want to be better than them.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. That story gives me chills. That's awesome. Actually, before you brought up that story, I was going to ask you what drives you, but I think you just answered that without me asking. This has been awesome, man. This has been awesome. We could probably keep going, but I know you've got a tight schedule.
I got to take my kid to soccer camp here pretty soon. So
yeah, there you go. So let's get into the last questions here. What's and I can probably answer this right now, but what's one thing that you're better at than everybody else?
Yeah, not growing hair probably is my number one. I don't know that I'm like better than everybody, but I'm willing to, I think, work harder than most people, like to a fault. Cause I think I can do everything. So like I'm going to play basketball this year, and then I've already made a decision that I'm going to get really good at golf. We were talking about golf before we got on here. I've kind of like gone back and forth at it, but next year, like my next goal is to be a single digit handicapper.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, other than that, and other than basketball, what's next for you?
My sister and I have been strategically investing in real estate, like in our space. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be our big focus. I think we're going to raise a fund, to start buying more stuff. The time's right. Like, you and I were talking about kind of like the market in our space is really starting to open up. And so while we've grown this company, we'll be at probably 100 here pretty soon. Our next play is to really be more involved on the real estate side. And we'll still do the operations, but definitely on the real estate side, we're excited to be a bigger piece of what we do now.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, appreciate you coming. Oh, wait, actually, where can people find you? It sounds like you raise money. Maybe someone wants to raise money.
All kinds of stuff.
Invest in you.
Yeah. I mean, PriorityLifeCare.com is our, main business, and you can kind of look at that. And then like on Instagram, THSQB19, which is, again, I'll always be an athlete. So why wouldn't my handle, not be one? And I guess one other cool thing too, I forgot to mention is I'm sponsoring a team in the basketball tournament. It's the like televised one where the team plays for $1 million, like winner take all. So Fort Wayne champs, and I'm on the team actually. Yeah. So I probably won't play, but I spent the last 2 weeks in this camp with all professional players and all college players. And man, it was an absolute blast. And it's like one of those things where, you're a basketball player. It's one of those weird things when you play with like really good people, the game's easier. The spacing's there. Like I was getting open looks because, I'm playing with all these like really big guys. So hopefully at least see me on the bench if you tune into one of those games.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, again, the most interesting man in the world. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing. And yeah, man. Keep doing it. Keep grinding. Keep killing it. Good luck with basketball and everything else you're doing.
I appreciate you having me on, John, man. It was good to catch up.
All right, man. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks for following, subscribing, and listening to this episode of the Do More podcast hosted by John Farling. To learn more or ask questions, go to l4investing.com.